public safety. And that's really what's happened today is it's created a three-headed monster. It's created a monster of, we have a high incarceration rate, we have a high crime rate, and we have a high prison overcrowding rate. So that's not something to have, and it's preying upon our public safety and destroying our safety in our communities in our state. So to recap a little bit from my last press conference that I talked about the drafts, this first bill in this handout will show when I talked about my proposal will just, since 2 out of 3 inmates incarceration, the county backlog originate from just 8 counties. You know, I think that those 8 counties should be where these facilities are done, and that could be with the Board of Corrections action or with a partnership with one of these counties or the adjoining counties by majority vote of the court. And this will kind of show a map of what's going on with the 8 counties that are and county backlog. And the other is pretty much a handout to show the crime that started from the 2011 bill to the 2015 bill to the years in the budget of consistently underfunding corrections and public safety that's created this three-headed monster of high incarceration rates, high overcrowding, and high crime. So today I have filed 6 bills, and to outline, one is the bill that addresses the 8 counties and the possible funding the prisons. It takes the $600 million out of surplus funds and funds that's already allocated, and that would be the first bill. The second bill is going to address the crime crisis issue, because that's one thing the governor and this legislature has not done, and they're continuing not to do. So if you look at our issue, like I said, this three-headed monster, when you talk about our high crime rate that we're now having, we've got to take money to do that. Everything takes money to solve the problem down here. And as I say, a lot of times in government, it's like milk. Once it smells bad, you know, unfortunately we've had previous legislators that's talked tough on crime, that they just kept sticking it back in the refrigerator till now it's exploded to what I talked about earlier. So what I want to do is take a dedicated revenue stream where we know how this is going to be paid for. And what it would do is take the first sales tax that's collected at the start of the fiscal year, $100 million, and would go to a public safety fund. And basically the direction, details are still going to be worked out as we get out there and file this and get some feedback on it. But basically it would take this $100 million and it would work with the director of the state police, and it could possibly work with counties in the hiring of officers that their sole purpose would be for just public safety. It wouldn't be for writing tickets. It wouldn't be for working accidents. It would only be, they would only be designated for public safety. $100 million is a lot of money out of general revenue, especially when you're putting in a revenue stream. So that's going to have to be debated about that. But as I say, we're going to see if these legislators that talk so tough on crime that has actually created this problem, we're going to see if they actually want to put their money where their mouth is. And so what this would do is right now be a flexible plan right now to look at the director of the state police, that they could hire officers with state police officers. They could partner with counties. One of the questions early on I got about it that I got some positive feedback is why counties. If there's one unique thing about all of our counties, whether it's Pulaski County or Carroll County or Franklin County, typically county deputies make less than the cities. So a lot of times a county will train, have a good officer, go through 3 or 4 years with the county, and the next thing you know, they leave and go to a city and make more money. So that's why I want to focus on the counties. And one thing that they can do in one of the drives that I've got positive feedback already for people, long-time retired law enforcement people, is that they need to assist probation and parole. I mean, probation and parole has been underfunded and overworked for years. I mean, those people are really struggling to do the best job that they can that is outlined, that we give them the duties to perform. So that's one of the things that would be in this, that these public safety officers would be that they would assist probation and parole and hopefully, you know, reduce recidivism. They may be patrolling areas that are not, quite frankly, getting patrolled. So I think that the overall goal of this is to move the needle from what we've seen of creating this triple-headed monster of high incarceration rates, high prison overcrowding, and high crime, is try and move the needle back to more public safety. Once again, it's going to take money, it's going to take partnerships, it's going to take a statewide effort to do that. So one of the other things about the funding mechanism is Michael's sitting here and we're going back almost 18 years, is how to pay for it. And some of the proposals I'm looking at is a constitutional amendment that would go to the people and take the excess money after administration from the medical marijuana money and designate that to this public safety fund. So it could possibly pass by the people, could alleviate the $100 billion off of general revenue. The second part is casinos. It's doing the same things with casinos. Some of the budget people tell me that the figures out of that, if it passed, would be somewhere around 40 million of that. So that's one of the goals. The third one, the last one I want to talk about is, we remember back, if some of you may not remember, but we had the GIF scandals with corruption and legislators. We had the college up there, Exeter College, with the college president. I think they took $900,000 of GIF money. I didn't send money there. But later the college president and others went to prison over that. So I have been involved in a legal action lawsuit as a citizen when I was out to make them repay that money. I believe they should pay the taxpayers back. It's a shame other legislators that were a part of that process haven't demanded that. But if we, prevail in that for the taxpayers, which I hope, any settlement out of that would go to the public safety fund. Might look at other lawsuits of money that possibly the Attorney General, but right now that's the starting point of that. So like I said, this has been a three-headed monster that is preying upon our public safety. And it's been, the three-headed monster is prison overcrowding, it's high crime, and a high incarceration rate. And to solve that, we're gonna have partnerships out there with counties, we're gonna have money, and we're gonna have a statewide effort, because if we don't, if we continue on this process, no matter how many prisons you do, we're just gonna keep filling them up. And one of the problems that you see that's frustration in the legislature in my time, and being a farmer, we have to look down the road, a rancher. In politics today, a lot of times they're just looking for the next political hit piece. My issue with that is that we've got to look down the road, and a lot of times when you start in these states where these Republicans beat their chest and pass these tough on sentencing laws, you just see more people going to jail, more people going to jail. My hope in this drive is to have the needle where less people are going to jail, we have less recidivism, and we have safer streets. But to do that, it's going to take money. So I've been very clear about how much money we're going to spend and take. I've been very clear about where the money's going to come from a dedicated revenue stream. And I've been, clear about getting out there with the people and discussing this and trying to find solutions to make their community safer. Where as far as the governor, we can see in the Franklin County proposed prison, it's been riddled with, unfortunately, with lies, deception, gross incompetence of the selection side. We see that in the emails. We see now that the original figure that they came up with, the 470 million, 3,000 bed prison, which was unrealistic from the start. We've not got where they got that figure from. We just basically, in a private meeting, Senator Stokeville and I had with Mr. Porfiry in the governor's office, their answer was, basically, you just need to give us an open checkbook. Well, that's not good enough. That's not what fiscal responsibility is. That's not what I was taught as a Republican a long time ago. So what I'm trying to do, like I said, is be clear, concise in the direction I'm going, allow flexibility out there in a statewide effort to, number one, reduce prison overcrowding, two, to tackle our high incarceration rate, which is embarrassing, and our high crime rate, which is embarrassing. That has been built by years of Republican legislators a lot of times that are beating their chest, when in reality the bills, like I said in 2015, if you look at the titles of these bills they've been running, have been to reduce prison overcrowding and reduce crime. And things have got worse and exploded. So like I said, I'm proposing, I think, a fiscally responsible, clear, concise plan, and with flexibility to get out there and work and try and reduce and get our public safety back, where people do not feel unsafe, where maybe they can go to Park Plaza and other, not have to worry about, like years ago, that are you going to make it? So with that, I'll answer your questions. I do have to go to committee here in a little bit too, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. When do you have to leave? Just so we can be mindful.
I need to leave at 9:45 to go to committee. And I'll be later, today before I leave.
One of the things you had mentioned was partnerships, especially with counties.
Mm-hmm.
Who have you talked to about building these partnerships, and what is their reception been of this? You might have already said some of that, but can you say some more?
Yeah, one thing I start out, my district, Senate District 8, pays my salary, so I visited with a lot of the sheriffs and the county judges in my area. Madison County, for example, I visited with some of the officials there, and when I talked about the partnership, Madison County is building a $16 million jail, 150-bed jail. You know, one of the things they said was that we would have been really interested in that had we passed this 2 years ago, or even 17, back when I tried before, because, you know, smaller counties like that, we could have partnership with them, and they could have housed Washington and Benton counties prisoners that they're overcrowded with, and we could have done a partnership with them and possibly been a win-win where the citizens in Madison County, a $16 million jail, after you finance it's going to be $40 million. So we could have saved on the principal, done stuff on the front end, and at least took care of the problem at that point, and it would have been a win for the citizens and taxpayers of Madison County and the taxpayers of Arkansas and for public safety.
Any conversations outside of your region?
What's that?
Sorry, any conversations outside of your region?
I've been, you know, since 2006 elected, so I've built a lot of relationships. A lot of those county sheriffs and stuff that I worked in 2015, I was the author of the allowing county officials, the constitutional men allow 4-year terms. A lot of them are retired, and the good news about them being retired is they got to retire to public service, but there's a lot more interesting and honest dialogue of not being the public official. So I've visited with several of them around the state, and now I'm going to get out around the state and go visit with communities. So yeah, I fortunately, in 18 years, I've built a network and relationships out there with a lot of county officials and law enforcement people.
Anybody else have a question?
You have another one?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So also, you had talked about taking money out of the medical marijuana fund. It sounded like the governor had planned to use at least some of those funds for certain things, like I think school lunches or school breakfast, that sort of thing. Have you been engaged in any conversations with her, or do you know how that might work? Since she wants to use it for at least part of it for one thing, do you want to use part of it for another?
Yeah, that was in her address after we met. We finally did get, Senator Stubblefield and I finally got one meeting with Mr. Porphyry and Mr. Magnus and some of the governor's staff. I mean, so that came out later. Naturally, in our budget session, it's always about a competition about funds and paying for it, and that's why it is so good that the debate starts now. So it's going to be about priorities. Anytime you give, you know, our state budget is like a balloon. Anytime you expand somewhere else, it's going to contract. So we're going to have to prioritize things. That's what we do in a budget. Whether we have good years or bad years, we have to prioritize those things. So that's going to be in the competition things of saying what can be funded and where it goes. I will say this, once again, there is nothing out there from the governor or anybody else, and I went back to 2017, I've been critical of 2015, that attacks this three-headed monster of high incarceration rates, high crime rates, and high overcrowding. I'm trying to address all those things right here. You just can't piecemeal this thing. We've got to take, as I said earlier in my first comments, several months ago, we've got to take a holistic approach, because this is just going to cost us in the long run.
So you talked about, anybody wants to jump in, by all means, you've talked about this as an alternative to the Franklin County Prison, and it sounds like some pretty significant money's already been invested in that, so do you have any thoughts as to how they might pull back from that in some way if they were to, say, go with your plan as an alternative to Franklin County? I don't know if that question makes sense.
One of the things I did in my previous life was work in the construction business out there building jobs, and I did learn from somebody that had worked on big projects, an older guy that was one of the smartest guys I know. He said, you know, Bryan, you won't be judged on your profitable ones. You won't be judged on the ones, your construction projects that you didn't lose money on. He said you probably won't even be judged on the ones how bad, you're going to be judged on how bad you lose money on a project, but mostly your smartest decisions, he told me, is very smart, that I learned in the construction business, is when you get in a bad deal early, it's better to retract back rather than go forward. This is going to be a $1.5 billion, it's not $470 million, we already know that, they're already backing up on that. So right now is the time to back out of that. The Franklin County judge has said publicly that somebody would buy the land. So I think that they're trying to work with state taxpayers, and I'm also trying to do something with counties to allow flexibility out there with these adjoining counties. I mean, it may be that Madison County, with a majority of the Foreign Court, or Scott County, may look at the situation and think, we want the we'll take the economic development, we'll take the jobs, we'll take the responsibility, and you can have a win-win for the people of Scott County and Sebastian County. I mean, you know, we're trying to work in flexibility and be, instead of being this drive of saying, wake up one day and say, hey, guess what? You're getting a prison. I don't care what you think. Let me go back to Mr. Porphyry, who has been on record that says the community needs to embrace this. Where's that been? I mean, obviously they don't embrace it, and anytime you start shoving stuff down people's throat, it's never a good process. it's better to be upfront and honest and not lie and deceive them like what the governor's done.
And you did say you filed all 6 of these today.
Yeah, one of them is a draft, the one on the efficacy of law, or the GIF illegal exaction. That's a draft right now, it didn't get printed off, but that will be filed later.
And then just following up, last time we had your press conference, you kind of focused on drafting up a bill about expanding county jails. Did you file that one?
Yes, that's one of the first ones I filed. You'll see that in your packet.
Okay.
The second one's a crime one in your packet.
And then another question, you FOIA'd the Board of Corrections when you were trying to get some information about who actually the inmates really come from, which we figured in that FOIA that it came from more Pulaski County, Central Arkansas, not more there in your area. Have you kind of talked to the Board of Corrections in this process as well, following these 6, following that?
Yeah, I've talked to Chairman Magnus. I can't get around to talking to everybody, so I talked to Chairman Magnus, who I've known for 18 years and had, Benny and I have had a very good relationship, and it's sometimes we agree and sometimes we butt heads, but, Benny and I have had a good, I've had some discussions with him about it, and I think that I've asked for a time with the next Board of Corrections meeting to come talk to the Board of Corrections.
And I kind of just skimming through the language, forgive me, a lot of what just stands out to me, it just says enhancing public safety. Would you not say the governor is trying to do the same thing? Would you argue that she's not trying to enhance public safety as well by building this prison, trying to get more inmates to tackle the overcrowding and go to Franklin County?
Yeah, and I'll give the governor credit. I mean, I'm going to be somebody that's been out here, I'm not going to be totally critical. She has done an admirable job of trying to open up more beds, but when you do that, we think of solving something, everything has a money aspect to it. So the more beds you open up that go out of county jail, it's going to cost state taxpayers. It costs state taxpayers more to keep them in state than it does county. So every time you do something, everything is about money and being fiscally responsible. I would love to do a lot of things, but you can't pay for it. And I think the other thing is looking down the road. I mean, right now, Alabama, like we've talked about, in 2021, they were going to build 2 4,000 bed prisons for $1.3 billion. They're half done with one right now, and they're estimated $1.3 billion. So we know this original figure that she has thrown out is just not even realistic. And now we're not even getting realistic figures of how much it costs, and we should have known an estimate before the land was purchased. Anybody does that. I would have been fired by noon in my construction business if I had handled it like this. So that's why we've got to look at a holistic approach, because if we don't try and address the crime on the front end and help our county deputies, help probation and parole, which is already overworked and underpaid for years. And so if we don't do that and have a holistic approach, we could build 3 more prisons. And these counties, and I mentioned earlier, if you look at other states, when they pass these tough on sentencing laws that they like to beat their chest over, the reality is they just keep making more arrests. And the goal is not about making more arrests and putting more people in prison, because we've already got a higher incarceration rate. The goal in this part with the public safety is to make our communities safer where we're not making arrests. I would like to see that mother alive out there and had somebody out there in that parking lot looking or checking up on things and have her alive, rather than, and that's why we've got to look at the prioritizing of the money.
So this is, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's safe to say that some of these bills are an alternative to the Franklin County Prison, or not quite?
Well, I still call it a proposed Franklin County prison, because that's exactly what it is. We couldn't have been at better timing, because now we're in a budget session. It's not like, in these prison building companies, if somebody's done work back to 15 and 17, I'll just be honest with you. I'm not going to question their integrity, and also in the construction business, and I know this, they know once they get you in for $50 million, you're in for as much as they want to build. And you look at Alabama, look at Utah, for example. They estimated their prison at $650 million. It was well over $1 billion. So they know, that's just why it's so critical now. The amount of money that's been spent so far is minuscule compared to $1.5 billion. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the money that we spend is going to enhance public safety, not get 5 years down the road. Insiders tell me, and I've worked on this a lot, will tell me that there won't be 500 prisoners up there in this location at the end of 2030. So what are we going to do in the next 2 or 3 years? There's nothing on the table from the governor or anybody else down here to do anything immediately that we need now. Then we got the mother out here at Park Plaza that just got murdered. What's going to stop next week? My plan is to go July 1st, our first fiscal year, is to put $100 million and say, we're gonna start hiring officers dedicated to public safety, work with counties out there, work with probation parole.
So you mentioned the insider saying that there will be maybe 500 folks in the Franklin County Prison if it's built by 2030. Can you say more about why that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look, we've covered this. This location that they built, I wish it wasn't Franklin County. It wouldn't look like a NIMBY, which, I mean, the Franklin County people came down here and did a good job of saying, this is not a good location. As somebody in the construction business, as I tried to explain to the kids and the governor's staff and Mr. Porphyry, is to say, you know what, in the construction business, before you purchase a place, you go out there and do estimates and figure out how much it's gonna cost. You know, this place, this location, there's no road structure into it. I've asked the highway department for the load capacity for paving highways. Less paved highways in the state are not with the same mixture and mesh that are for high traffic areas. And so if you have a construction site on this level, you're probably gonna have 800 to 1,000 employees, cranes, hundreds of concrete trucks. So you literally probably are gonna have to realistically build expensive roads, and building 1 mile of road right now is probably 5 to 8 million. So, I mean, it's like, you didn't even think about that. You know, since I've been on the news, when I stopped in Clinton, I was at a convenience store getting gas, and the guy came up to me and he said, "Are you Bryan King?" And I went, "Oh no, what's he want?" You know, it was this. And he said, "You mean to tell me that," he was in the construction business, he said, "You mean to tell me they didn't even call the electric cooperative and asked how it's gonna get power out in the middle of there?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "I wouldn't build my wife a she shed in the back without figuring out how much that is." So that's why I get back to the gross incompetence of this whole thing. And the lie and deception is like, wait a minute here, we need to have a reset and look at a holistic approach and stay within budget constraints in the money part. And where is the money gonna come from? You know, we have seen no plan from the governor on where the money's gonna come from, how to pay for it 5 years from now. You go back and look at the budget figures, corrections that stay 8% of the budget. I asked the governor's staff and haven't got an answer. I said, how you gonna, you gotta up the corrections budget. It's gotta be 12% of the budget. I said, how you do that? Heard nothing about it.
I interrupted you. You had a question?
I was just gonna say in our interview, she did say that there was plenty of research, this is her quote, she did say there was plenty of research done. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I think you see what happened in the real research has been with the citizens of Franklin County through FOIA to see we're not going to be able to get 800 people out there to work. It's just not realistic in any rural county to be able to get. I mean, you're going to have somebody making $45,000 in Fort Smith that's going to drive an hour to Franklin County and then turn around and drive an hour home for the same amount of money. I mean, realistically, we've seen consistently that there wasn't a lot of research done. If you would have done the extensive research, like she said, you would have called the power company and figured out a cost estimate. You would have called the highway department and said, what's the road structure, figured out a road structure to even get the infrastructure to start building. You know, there was just so much done that was literally gross incompetence. The water, where are you going to get the water from? I mean, you're talking about building a 3,800 population city out in the middle of the country on a mountain rock.
So bottom line, are you saying that Franklin County was chosen because it was just cheaper?
No, I'm not even saying it's cheaper, because ultimately, as we've seen clearly, as she's already saying, the 470 million figure that she came up with, you might as well blow that up. It's not even realistic. So I don't know, where is the dedicated revenue streams to pay for this? Where are you gonna look 5 years down the road that is different from my plan and say, how are you gonna fund corrections? I mean, I'm giving you specifics of where this money's gonna come from and the pieces to get there to pay for it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.